Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dominika. I'm the curator at WMA, Wirtualne Muzeum Antropocenu. And today I have with me Jenna Strouth, who's one of the artists featured in our exhibition. I'm gonna give you a short intro of hers, read her bio, and then she's gonna present her work and talk about her art practice in the context of the Anthropocene. And at the end, we're gonna have 10 to 15 minutes for any questions. So as we go along, feel free to put the questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. So Jenna has been creating for decades and is mostly self-taught, working with watercolor, fabric, insects, and arthropods. She predominantly uses found objects, both human-made and natural, to create art concerned with overconsumption and abundant plastic pollution, containment within imposed limits, and reconciliation of the inherent value and beauty of objects with their other, possibly uncomfortable traits. Jenna aims to reveal the charm of oft-maligned creatures and mundane objects, and believes that anything, even trash like styrofoam packing, peanuts, and ocean plastic, can be used for art. She lives in San Francisco. Her art draws upon influences from her childhood in North Carolina and Hawaii. Jenna spent much of her youth outside exploring riverbanks, beaches, forests, and jungles, and just as much time inside rummaging through the cultural history depositories. There are antique stores, flea markets, and junkyards. With her MA in cultural anthropology and social transformation, she feels she can turn anything and everything into a cultural study. Jenna is convinced that ocean plastic has become an infinite resource on the planet for art and manufacturing. She imagines the Anthropocene's defining profession will be waste picking. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dominika, for that. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this exhibition. I'm delighted to be part of it. I think it's really important, and there's so many interesting artists in the gallery. So I'm going to talk and situate us to the Anthropocene, what it is for me, how I think about it, how it informs my practice. Then I'll have a slideshow to show the actual piece of art that's in this exhibit. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So in the 20 years since the term Anthropocene has been published and in use, it has come to mean many things to different people. And so the definition that I'm operating under is that it means humans have become the dominant force of nature on the planet. So we are dramatically and quickly changing the Earth's atmosphere, lithosphere, biosphere. And so that's a big deal, right? And it's a really big topic. And we already have all of the science, all of the research. It's out there on the internet. We have access to it. Things are not changing as quickly as they should be, given the fact that we have all of this information. And so that's why I think this Human Was Here exhibit is so exciting, because it's taking artist and creative perspectives and what the Anthropocene means to them. And my hope is that with all of these artists filtering out this idea, it will resonate with someone. Some piece of art dealing with the Anthropocene will resonate with someone and will help tell the story of what this human era actually means. So when I think about the influence of the Anthropocene in my work, I think about it in two buckets. I think about the human separation from non-human life, non-human spaces, and then I think about overconsumption and the sheer amount of stuff that we have. So with the human separation part of it, that's that human nature dualism. And when we name the Anthropocene the age of the human, we're naming that separation, and we're further reinforcing that there's a separation, that humans are outside of, or humans are above nature, right? And when you have any species, any one species that's dominating an ecosystem, that's not success. That's a failure. That's a failed, broken system. And also with the name Anthropocene, we're saying it's humans, right? Humans are making these changes, but it's not all humans. There's a lot of humans on the planet, but not all of them are really doing the level of destruction and implementing these changes. There's another term that's out there that I think maybe is becoming more appropriate, and it's called the capitalocene. And so it's looking at the relations between capital, nature, and power, and calling out capitalism as the sort of dominant force that's making these changes come, actually. So I think about, I want to talk about my consumption stuff. So I'm fascinated with the amount of stuff that we have. I'll speak for myself. I'm in a room that's filled with stuff. I'm in a house that's filled with stuff. I'm in a city that's filled with stuff. People have so much stuff here, they leave it out on the streets. And in fact, that's where I've got most of my stuff, is taking it for free off the street. That's how I get around consuming things by buying things. I just get it for free off the street. So I like to think about all of the stuff that we have and what that will look like when it's smashed in between rock strata thousands, millions of years from now. And what will the archaeologists of the future, human or non-human archaeologists of the future, what will they think when they look back at our stuff, our blenders and toaster ovens and Barbies and Furbies and plastic bags and all of the stuff that gets smashed? What's that story that they're going to tell about us? And so I've been using plastics to think through the concepts of the Anthropocene. So the piece that we'll be looking at today is made out of ocean plastic. And in thinking about the dramatic impact that humans are making on the planet, I think about those changes as we're making these changes to get a product. We're making these changes to get food for ourselves. We're making these changes to get minerals and metals for our cell phones, right? These things that have taken so long to make on a planetary scale. And then we're using them for little widgets and doodads. And plastic really permeates our lives. I was just reading something that said, your basic number 2 pencil, that is plastic, because the paint that's on the yellow paint is acrylic paint. And so if we think about all of the things that we touch that are plastic, I've got a pen here, a lotion cap, right? Think about all of the things that you've just touched today, or even in the last 30 minutes. The clothes that you're wearing, right? If you're wearing rayon or spandex or polyester, that's plastic. And so plastics represent energy that is millions of years old, because plastics come from fossil fuels. And so when I'm thinking through these concepts and making art, thinking about the Anthropocene, I like to think about the vast scope of time that has created ultimately the tiny little gelato spoon that you get when you go out for gelato. Tiny little spoon. You use it once, you probably finish that gelato in like 5 minutes, and then it's gone. So I'm ambivalent about plastics, because plastics save lives, right? But then plastic also extinguishes lives. And so we know that plastics have made such a huge difference in science, medicine. Plastics are crucial for getting clean drinking water to folks who need that. You can't just turn on the tap and get clean water in many parts of the world. And if you Google or use whatever your internet search engine is, and search for plastic pollution animals, you will see the ways in which plastic extinguishes lives. And the plastics industry has this slogan that says, plastics make it possible. And it's so filled with hope. Their website is so hopeful. And yes, we cannot deny that our lives are made so much better by the use of plastics. And go back to your internet engine search, your search engine, and type in plastic pollution people, and you will see that plastics are actually making it impossible for many people to live a high quality of life. Those are pretty staggering images, so I encourage everyone to check that out. And, I think I'm inspired by the Anthropocene because it does mark an awareness and an understanding that we know what we are doing to the planet. We know what we need to do, but when are we all going to get around to actually doing what we need to do to make things change, right? And by we, I don't necessarily mean us as individuals, although that is very important. I'm talking we, like the governments, the corporations, the companies, the big, powerful bodies that we need to make big, powerful changes. And, there's a lot of ideas out there for how to solve the problems of the Anthropocene. We've got some folks who are talking about colonizing the moon and colonizing the Mars, probably using the Earth's resources as energy to get there, leave the planet. And then we have other folks who are using the existing technologies to solve the problems here. So like vertical agriculture, rather than raising forests, building up and having agriculture, using plastic pollution, reforming that into building materials. So there's people are talking about it, people are thinking about what to do. I think whatever way we move forward with a solution that involves humans staying alive on the planet, necessarily will require us to form a relationship with the natural world, to realign and to align with the cycles and the systems of our planet, to remember that we are of this planet. We are nature, we are nature beings. And so I really advocate that people go out and become waste pickers, because automatically when you're picking waste in your particular area, you are connecting to the land. You have to be outside. I mean, you could pick waste in our garage, that would be helpful, but you've got to be outside for it. And you've got to be on the ground, right? Whether you're touching things with your hands, or maybe you're getting in close with some like waste picker tools or whatever, you're gaining this intimacy with the land that some of us don't often have, because we're not in the practice of picking up trash. But if we see ourselves as of this planet, the planet is part of us, it may feel like a drop in the bucket when you're picking up these little tiny pieces of trash. But it's a way of reconnecting with yourself and also taking care of the planet and reconnecting with the earth. So for Sand Sifter, I want people to see that in collecting trash, there's beauty in that trash. It becomes a beautiful material that we can use to create art with. We can create buildings with it. There's the possibilities are infinite. And I also encourage you to search plastic artists. There are so many of them doing so many amazing things, and it's really amazing. And so for me, Sand Sifter is a visually pleasing reminder of something that is horrifying, a horrifying happening on this planet. And so with that, I would like to share my screen and do a presentation. Let's see. Okay, can you confirm you see that? Cool, okay. So the piece is called Sand Sifter na Mokulua, and na Mokulua is the Hawaiian name for two islands, the two islands, and we'll have a picture of those two islands. So this is the piece, and we'll have some close-ups as well, but this is the piece in full. And it is the mokes, those are na Mokulua, with a little mini sand sifter on the shore. And the frame itself is meant to be a sand sifter. So you see there's some little finger spaces where there's like net. And the idea is that, you know, we're picking up this sand and sifting out, and the plastic is leaving behind this image. So to go back to my point about like, wow, the vast scope of time that's gone into plastics, I want to just clarify, where do plastics come from? So the remains of marine algae, plants, creatures from ancient seas, from millions of years ago, give that another, like under millions of years worth of intense pressure, high temperatures, you get crude oil, also known as fossil fuels. And so fossil fuels become many different things: petroleum, gasoline, diesel, etc. And then those things are further processed. But we're looking at petroleum. So petroleum becomes plastics. And again, imagine there's more plastic options. You know, there's not just one kind of plastic. And so then this little plastic spoon, the typical lifespan of its use is a day. So yeah, that just, I love thinking about that. So to further situate us in space, I did some quick sketches. So that's why it looks literally sketchy. So this is a globe with the Hawaiian Islands right there. And Hawaii is where I collected the plastic. So these are the Hawaiian Islands, and this is Oahu, where I collected. This is a close-up of the island, and it's just this particular area where I collected. There's two beaches, Kailua Beach and Waimanalo Beach, and the mokes are in between. So here are the mokes, and this is on Lanikai Beach. And this was taken in November or December of 2019. So right before the world changed as we knew it. And so I haven't been there. I haven't been anywhere since this trip. And so I'd like to also situate us in some sensations, right? Like what does it feel like to be outside, be in a different space? So you can pretend that you're this guy, that's my partner, Jeff. You feel the sun on your skin, you feel the sand in between your toes, you feel the water, you feel the salt spray from the wind. It's usually very windy when I'm there in the winter time. So beautiful islands, very dramatic in this particular photo. They're almost completely black. You can't see that they actually have colors. And here and there, I have some key terms sprinkled in. So this term is amanuensis, and Jeff is my amanuensis. He's my artistic assistant. So this is Waimanalo Beach, and this is just south from Lanikai Beach. And as you can see, it's beautiful. The sand is like, oh, it's so soft. It's a very fluffy sand at this particular beach. The watercolor, it's amazing. These beaches are lined with these sort of feathery conifers. And so they've got these feathery pine type needles. And so you've got the sound of the needles rustling, the sound of the waves. Again, it's nice and warm. Sand, it looks so beautiful. This is what it looks like up close. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can't tell what these things are, right? You can't tell the life that they had before they degraded to this point on the beach. There's a bottle cap. So what I am finding on these two beaches are mesoplastic and microplastic. So mesoplastics are any plastics that are 2.5 centimeters to 5 millimeters. And then microplastics are anything less than 5 millimeters. And of course, there's things like macroplastics and nanoplastics, but these are the plastics that I am collecting. And this is Kailua Beach after a storm. So we can pretend to smell the rain after a storm, smell the humidity in the air. I really miss having humidity that's nice and warm in Hawaii or North Carolina. There's nothing like being wrapped in a warm blanket of humidity. It's like a very hot, wet comforter. You can see that it's windy. There's some kite surfers out there. And this is what I found on the shore. So mostly microplastics. You can see there's several like layers of it, you know, as we go down the beach. And on this particular day, I was struck because I had never seen the microplastics washing in the waves. And so you can't see it in my photo, but you know, you can look at, I was looking at the waves and seeing the churn of the plastics in the waves. Oops, did my screen go away? Okay. I keep getting these like updates to tell me that Adobe Flash is going away. So this is a close-up of the microplastics that were on Kailua Beach. And you can see there's a lot of organic matter that also comes up with the storm, and grasses and seeds and other things, twigs. And in looking at this, I think this is when I really started to think this can be an infinite resource, right? It's so hard to try to capture all of this plastic. I was on vacation, so I didn't have any sand sifting tools or sieves or anything. But if you look at it, it's horrifying and it's also beautiful, right? There's so many colors in this. There's greens and teals, and there's some coral and orange and yellow and fuchsia in there. So again, I'm like holding this beauty and also horror at the same time. So again, just to situate us, 2 beaches, maybe 2 hours of collecting plastic, 1 day, maybe 2 days, 1 part of the world. And this is not, this island is not known for being a trash island. You know, I think there's other places in the world like Midway Atoll that has a reputation for being places where plastics accumulate, specifically on Midway in the albatross babies. So again, limited scope of time, limited geographical space, and that's how much plastic that I found and I saw. So this is what I brought back. These bags worth of plastic, you can see they're pretty filthy. There's sand and organic matter in them. And to sort this size of plastic is pretty difficult. And so I actually spent several months trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, and sifting and sorting and sort of rinsing it off. So I used a colander and I used a sieve. And the colander is good for rinsing out a lot of things and sifting down the smaller stuff. And then the sieve, I thought, oh, if I put it in water, all the organic matter will rise up and the plastics will fall. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of plastics, and the majority, I don't know if it's the majority float or the majority sink, but I had floating plastic, so that did not help me. So I have a little video, and I hope you can hear the sound. Could you hear that? Okay. So I just love that sound of like the plastic rattling against each other. And then it's this sort of weird, perverse meditation singing bowl sound at the end. And then here's another one, again, smaller plastics. And it almost makes me think of like a shaman's rattle or something, right? Like I feel like I could hear that sound all the time. So I'm talking about the sensations because I think collecting trash and touching waste we don't want to do that, right? It's gross, it's nasty. Well, we can wash our hands afterwards. And I just want to make sure that I'm sharing that there are these little pleasures that come with interacting with things that we don't normally interact with, and in fact try to avoid interacting with. And so this was one of the final stages of like, okay, I think I know how to sort the plastic, and really it's just taking handfuls of plastic and sorting, picking out colors, picking out shapes, and notice that I'm using plastic to sort and hold my plastic. Plastic is everywhere. And this is one of the final stages of sorting, where now I'm breaking it down into colors and sizes. And you can see in these buckets here, they're varying levels. Like these are mesoplastics with a little bit of debris, and then microplastics, and then mostly debris. So like that whole sorting, it took a long time. And on the right here, you can see the different colors, and they're really quite beautiful. And you can also see they've taken on this patina, right, of having been in the ocean for so long and having been under the hot sun and probably inside of fish and other animals, being chewed on, all that kind of stuff. And so this was the end when I had all of my plastics that I wanted to use sorted. And I thought, oh, they look so pretty. They look like pigments in paint pots. And, I feel like I could have just stopped there and been happy with, oh, I put them all together and it's pretty. So I want to show these. These are what I call like my gemstones of ocean plastic pollution, because I like circles, I like spheres. They're nice, they're calming, they're soothing. And again, they're horrifying because, we know that it's pollution. So I think these might be ball bearings, plastic ball bearings. And then these are different fibers. So we've got some rope. This is a plastic shaving, maybe like post-production plastic. Part of it's just sort of shaved off. Maybe some dental floss in there. And then nurdles. So nurdles are the pre-production plastic resin pellets. And so it could be that these things that I think are ball bearings are also a form of nurdles, where they're eventually going to get heated and melted down and injected into a mold to become a plastic product. And so this is me working on it. That's my workstation there. This was during the pandemic, but I was at home. So I'm not wearing a mask because of the pandemic. I'm wearing a mask because the construction adhesive that I was using was very strong, and it's like, oh, you got to open windows. So the only thing that I purchased for this particular piece was the construction adhesive. Everything else is found trash. The wood my partner found, he made that frame, and we had the window screen in the house already. So I appreciate that, even though of course I'm like solidifying the plastic pollution forever. At least when it's found under a rock, it'll be nice and cute. So here are some close-ups of the piece. And you can see I've got those mesoplastics, microplastics, and then I'm trying to stuff every single possible space with a microplastic. And so we've got a Ronald McDonald toy here. We've got a toothbrush. We've got bottle caps. Here's our single-use plastic spoon. And then just a bunch of other random pieces. There's some nurdles down here. And there's little Ronald's face. And here's another close-up. We can see these are bottle caps, and they look like they've been chewed on, probably because they've been chewed on by marine animals. And then there's a bunch of random things that I don't know what they are, but they keep coming up, like this object here, and then there's one in the corner. They have something to do with oysters. So I don't know if they're oyster, I don't even know. I don't know. I looked it up. There's something about oyster catchers or oyster something. And so if you look, you can see there's more of that patina visible, and you can see certain plastics have cracks. They're on their way to breaking down. This plastic down here and maybe some other ones, it's possible that they had life growing on them. So we know that there are some plastics floating out there that have microbes growing on them. Other life, right? Barnacles grow on plastics. And once those plastics are weighted down with life, they start to sink as well. And another close up, this is the sun. So the sun is made with bottle caps and beads, and those little ball bearings or nurdles. And then the mini sand sifter, obviously there's some pretty obvious items in here. There's a straw, and there's this Black and Mild cigarette or cigar tip. I actually find a lot of those in San Francisco on the beach. And then this right here, this like pink and blue line, Ziploc bags have that, pink on one side, blue on the other, and you put them together and they're purple. That's what that is from. It's from a Ziploc bag. And this is the end of my slideshow. I just wanted to put that up one last time. So yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
That's been amazing. So detailed. I mean, I have no words. Like, seeing all those up close images of what you found and what you used it's crazy how much waste and like little tiny things that could be repurposed are just discarded, like the nerds. Like I actually remember that my senior year in college, I was experimenting like with wearable technology, but also like trying to make like little elements out of plastic, and you can actually purchase nerds to heat them up in a bowl and like mold them however you want, and then you can do it basically infinitely. You just need to heat it up. But at the same time, to think that those are just being discarded from the industrial side instead of just being, you know, you can sell those and a student can use it for something, or an artist, or, you know, anyone.
Yeah.
So it just seems like it's such a wasted opportunity there. But we do have one question from Kat. How were you able to distinguish the plastic, especially lighter colored plastic, from shells and rocks?
I love that question because, yeah, that comes up for me. So I'm still collecting plastic in San Francisco. And so I'm getting familiar with this particular beach. It's close to my office. I haven't picked there before. And I just smash it with my fingernail. And if it's a natural substance, you know, it may break in a different way. And then if it's plastic, if it's a very old plastic, it's going to break. And then I'll be able to see by looking at it that, you know, a natural object, when it breaks, it doesn't break in a straight line, right? It might crumble a little, have like a sort of a jagged, more natural edge. Plastics don't have that. They've got a straight line, or they crumble in a very specific way. And there's a kind of plastic that I haven't talked about, which is, they're calling it like plastic conglomerate. And the idea is that it's a bunch of plastics and maybe some natural rocks or sand that have been melted together. So when people have bonfires on beaches, or other reasons why you might have fires, those plastics are being melded together. And so there are some of those plastics that wait, is that a plastic or is it a rock? But again, it's that touching and feeling. And sometimes, you know, I use like a tiny hammer to actually break it. And then at that point I've broken it and I can't use it, but yeah.
Amazing. We have another question. At what point in your process did you decide what your composition was going to look like?
Oh, I love that question. To me, this is really fascinating. Like, I like the idea of collecting plastics in a space and making a work that is site specific to that space. And I think when I was collecting on Waimanalo, collecting on Kailua, I didn't yet understand what was I going to do with all of this plastic, right? I just knew I had to take it home with me and figure it out. And what struck me is that the Mokes, those two islands that are in between, like, everyone loves them. They're so beautiful. People go there to take pictures. People go there for modeling shoots and wedding photos. And, you know, it's on postcards. If you go to Kailua, the town, there's art everywhere that's these Mokes, you know? And so I thought, like, it would be kind of subversive to show this beautiful scene with the plastic that is, you know, rumbling beneath the surface there. And even now, as I'm collecting the plastic from Crissy Beach, which is it's very close to the base of the Golden Gate Bridge, I'm very specifically looking for reds and oranges and yellows because I want to create a Golden Gate Bridge piece. So I think that's the joy of waste picking, is as I'm touching those materials, ideas are coming to me for what I would like to work on.
That makes sense. We have another question from Olivia. Thank you for the presentation, Jenna. You discussed how you want to find a way to show the scope of how long it takes for plastic to be made from fossil fuels to how short their lifespan of use is. What are some processes you went through to make sure that scope of time was present in your work?
I don't know if I did. Right? Like, I think like I'm using art as a way to think through ideas just for myself, right? And I think Olivia's question hits on this idea of like, does a work mean what the author wants it to mean to you, or like, is it up to your interpretation? So I would say it's in my mind, and by being in my mind, I've put it into the work, and I don't know if it was intentional.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Olivia has another question. During the presentation, I noticed you took time to help us feel like we were at the beach and the texture of our surroundings before showing us the plastic on the beach. How important is texture in the work, and is it important in your work for the audience to feel a distinct difference between natural versus plastic textures in the pieces?
I think, yeah, I would like things to be visually textural, because if we're thinking about work, a piece of artwork being in a space, you're not allowed to touch it, right? So yeah. Well, the question was like, how are you, now I'm like off on this other tangent of thought. Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, of course. How important is texture in the work, and is it important in your work for the audience to feel a distinct difference between natural versus plastic textures?
Yeah, I think there is that sort of jarring juxtaposition where it's like the sand is so soft, and then you've got these like hard pieces of plastic that you're crunching on as you walk. I think that it also speaks to the fact that like on some level, plastics are natural, right? They've come from the earth, and we, through humans and machines and technology, right, we've processed it to such a point that it becomes a non-natural object. That's why I tried to use the term organic, because all materials are of nature on some level. In some of their historical past, they have been of nature. So I think that's one of those things there's that constant balancing, constant tension of a natural texture versus a non-natural texture. Oh, I love this question.
It's a really good one.
Yeah.
We have another question. I love how your works include time as an underlying theme. What do you think the life cycle of your work will look like?
I think most of the works that I do are meant to not last. So watercolor, it's on paper and it fades over time. Paper will disintegrate over time. I do work with insects. Their bodies will eventually decay. I have another piece where it's natural debris, and I've had it for I don't know how many years now, and I can see that it is decaying as it just exists in my home. There's little pieces of for humans it would be dust, right? Like dust is skin, and it's like, ugh, what a dirt, like it's all these things. So I can see my pieces actually decaying. So when I think about the plastic stuff, plastics do decay and they degrade, but they will be here for a very long time. And that's something that I sort of feel again with that oppression of stuff, right? Like, what do I do with all this artwork that's not going to decay after I die? Like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm dead. Then someone else has to deal with it. But in my lifetime, right? Like, what do I do with all this stuff that I've created? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, and like we as a team at the museum actually talked about that in one of our meetings recently, about how a lot of artists who create work that has to do with waste actually do it by, instead of using the existing waste, they just purchase new materials by default, creating more waste to comment on the problem itself, which is very weird and like dynamic. That's just like a paradox in itself. Okay, we have a comment from Dion. Your mom wants to know if you want people to touch your art.
I would say no touching. Maybe the plastic one, but that's at your own risk, right? Because plastics degrade and their chemicals become more bioavailable. And so I would say no.
That's interesting, because I thought for a second you would say yes, because like the works are like, especially the Sand Sifter, you just want to touch it, you just want to feel the different textures. But you're right, like as plastic degrades, it gets more and more toxic. So you don't necessarily want to touch it, even though it looks really cool.
Yeah.
You know inside that it would feel really cool and interesting.
So that's like taking it to the next level, because then I'm adding human oils, random human fingertips to it. I'm open to the idea.
We have another question from Olivia. Can you talk about the way you adhered the plastic to the frame? Like, did you place and glue each individual piece, or did you glue sections together before gluing to the frame?
I would say the only section that I glued together before I added to the frame was that little miniature sand sifter. And even then there was only some parts of that. I glued down the big mesoplastics first, those things that I knew I wanted to sort of build up around. Like I wanted people to see the bottle caps and those sort of bigger things. So I put the glue down, I put the pieces down, and then in some sections I would just spread a swath of glue and then put the plastics down into it.
That makes sense. I can see that happening. It's like when you were working with the smaller ones with the microplastics, did you like place them individually, or did you just like kind of?
Yes, I placed them individually.
Oh my God.
I didn't have a nice set of tweezers, of artist tweezers. So I was using like some old regular rusty tweezers that you would use for your eyebrows. Like that's what I was using. I also used like wooden disposable toothpicks, and it just sort of shaved them down to a point. And then I would put adhesive on that and then like stick it, and then each little meso or microplastic, sticking it into place. Yeah, it was pretty tedious.
How long did that take? Because that sounds like such a long process.
Yeah, I totaled it up and I think it took about 160 something hours. It was a lot.
That is a long time. That is a long time. We have a question from Kat. What plastic projects are you currently working on? What would you like to create in the future?
So the piece that I'm collecting for now, I think I mentioned, is the something to do with Crissy Beach, which is in San Francisco, and it's within view. It's within the bay, and we've got the Golden Gate Bridge on one hand, and there's Angel Island and Alcatraz. It's a beautiful space. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm only doing it on my lunch break. So we're talking like 30 minutes a day where I'm like trying to collect as much plastic as I can, but also enjoy myself at the beach. So that's what I'm working on. sort of longer term. What I'm most immediately interested in and working on is collage. So I'm using all of these vintage books, including some that I found on the street. And just again, trying to convey with paper the overwhelm of stuff, right? That we're literally sitting on mountains of stuff. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm very excited about that.
That sounds super interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned like finding things on the street. For example, it's not as easy to do in Poland because the way trash is collected is so different than in the US. But when I lived in the US, I also so when I lived in the dorms, at the end of the term, we had those big donation bins.
Oh, yeah.
For Salvation Army, so students could discard their things and like that they no longer needed. And it was so interesting to see what people got rid of because, no joke, there were like completely new clothes with tags on them. Yeah. There were like one of my coworkers who I worked with in the dorms, like she found a brand new MacBook. Like it was crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but like that's how I found a lot of materials for my projects.
Nice.
And you know, the practice, and I still have friends in the US who just like, you know, find things on the street and are like, oh my God, look at what I found. Like this is so cool because my neighbor was getting rid of it and then they just put it on the curb.
Exactly.
Whereas here, like everyone just put things in the trash and like we have like little trash houses with like the massive bins. So the practice is not as popular and it's like, it's more difficult to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you got to be a dumpster diver there.
Yep, pretty much. It's not as easy. But hopefully it can change a little bit because like the things you can find is just, it's crazy what people get rid of. Okay, do we have any more questions? Because we still have some time. So if anyone has any last minute questions, now would be the time to put them in the chat or the Q&A box.
We don't have to keep sitting here in silence. So if there's no other questions, I do just want to urge everyone who's on this call today, if you haven't gone to the virtual gallery that the Museum of the Anthropocene has set up, please do. Dominica put it together. It's really incredible. You're like literally walking through a gallery. I love it. And there's other artists there who have really interesting and unique perspectives to offer on what this means to be in the Anthropocene. And the other fun thing about the gallery is you are invited to participate. So send your pictures in of what the Anthropocene means to you and human impact. That way you can be part of this conversation as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a competition running through all of February. With the images, but everyone's still like, I still encourage everyone to send us pictures that you take of like trash that you find on the street or, you know, like things that reminds you of the Anthropocene. And we're gonna put them in the gallery for the last couple of weeks. We have a question.
Okay.
You have been going to Mokulua Beach for many years. Is this the first year you have noticed the plastic there? I have been there many times and have not noticed it, so now I'm questioning whether it was there all along or I just didn't see it. I've been fascinated by the Sand Sifter since you showed it to us from afar. It is beautiful and reminds me of spending time in Hawaii, and then you get a closer look and realize how endangered it is. Such a beautiful and meaningful piece. I 100% agree with that comment.
Thank you. Yes, so I have been visiting my family in Hawaii for the past 25 years. And this was the first time that I saw that amount of plastic on Kailua Beach. Now, Waimanalo Beach, I feel like I've always seen plastic washing up ashore there. And in fact, the first time I really realized it was a problem is I was sitting on the beach and watching this black tube, just like a huge sort of PVC pipe, this black tube wash ashore. So I'm watching it. I'm watching it. It's on the shore at beaches, and out from the tube come these little beautiful fishes, these little black and white fishes. There was like a parent fish and then all these little baby fish. And so they're flopping around on the sand. And I realized, like, oh my God, these fish have been using this trash for their home. This has been keeping them safe as they go. So, you know, we collected the fish and putting the pipe back in and hoping that the fish are going to find that pipe. And so it was this weird moment where it's like, oh, I'm putting the trash back into the ocean, right? But the plastic has now become the fish's home, right? So the like plastics are not that one thing. Trash is not one thing. We have to always hold that they are all of these things. So to answer that question, I've been seeing it on Waimanalo Beach and some other beaches for a while, but that was the first time that I've seen that on Kailua Beach. And I think it has something to do with that particularly strong storm that happened and really sort of churned all the waters. Yeah.
I have another question.
Okay.
To what extent do you feel plastic is a part of our identity as humans? Do plastics help us think we aren't part of nature?
Man, I think plastics are inside of us, like literally, right? Like if we think about the nanoplastics and the nanoplastics that have been found inside of the smallest creatures in the ocean, right? What eats the smallest creatures in the ocean? Other small creatures, other like, and so on and so. And then we eat. I don't eat that stuff, but people eat that stuff. But it doesn't matter if you don't eat seafood. I imagine, and I'm sure there's research out there, but I'm not familiar with it. But we know that like the fabric industry, specifically using those plastic fibers, those are the nanofibers that really get into water. So if they're able to get inside those small microscopic animals, they're probably inside of the plants that we eat. Yeah, so plastics are inside of us. Plastics are being made human. Through our creation and pollution and spreading them widely.
Yeah, and I think there's also been research that the nanoplastics are found in water and in bottled water as well. So we definitely do consume plastic, whether we want to or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is scary and also fascinating to think about, because like this is stuff you can't see because it's so tiny. And you know, when you think of plastic, you think of like, I don't know, plastic toys or like bottle caps, like all the things that you can clearly see and like visualize, and you don't think about like all the tiny particles,
right,
that are also it, and just like detach and, you know, spread out. Yeah, it's a very interesting and rich subject to think and about and to dissect, because there's just so many angles to it. And like you said, it's scary, but also there is a certain beauty to it, and we need to realize that it's not just waste, but also it's being adapted by the other animals and creatures out there for homes and for survival. So it's interesting to think about.
It is.
Jenna, thank you so much for presenting. It's been truly amazing. everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you liked it and you found out a lot of new things. Definitely go look up the terms that Jenna mentioned. Take a look at her other work as well. And yeah, I also invite you to come to our gallery and walk around, take a look at all the other works. Like Jenna said, you can literally walk through a virtual gallery, but you can also zoom in on the pieces. You can take a very close look at everything. It's really one of a kind space. So definitely worth checking out. So thank you again. Have a great evening or the rest of the day wherever you are. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Dziękuję.
Bye.
Bye.